Hello everyone. So in today's video we'll talk about production possibility curve. Okay. This is the basic name of the concept. There are people who also call this production possibility frontier or production possibility boundary. All these names are basically the same thing. They explain the same concept. This is just the difference of names. Okay, before we move on to the main concept and the main theory, first let's talk about the assumptions this concept makes. Okay, we need a certain assumptions to understand this concept. Actually, not a certain, but only two assumptions that we need to understand this concept. The first assumption is that there are only two goods. There are two goods which are being produced, and there is no other good which is being produced other than these two goods. The second assumption which we'll make, that all resources are mobile. Okay, all resources can transfer between the production of one good to the production of another, and from the production of second good to the production of first good. Well, actually at this point we'll also make a third assumption which we'll relax in further advanced courses, but right now to understand the production possibility curve we will also have to make the third assumption, that is there is no imports and exports. There is no imports and no exports. What does this mean? That there is no trade between this country and the rest of the world. If this is the whole world and this is our country, so there is no trade. There is no trade with the rest of the world. We're basically like North Korea or some country like that. Okay, so there is no trade with the rest of the world. So these are the three basic assumptions that we need in order to understand the production possibility curve. So now coming to the main point, that what is production possibility boundary or what is production possibility frontier. So it is basically the maximum goods that can be produced by the given amount of resources or the given amount of resources in the economy, or the given amount of resources to the industry, if I am talking about the production possibility curve of the industry. Okay, so this is the maximum goods that can be produced, or the combination of two goods, the maximum possible combination of two goods that can be produced given the limited amount of resources. Now if I talk about the graph, I know I make really bad graph. Okay, so let's talk about the graph. Let's say I have two goods, good Y and good X. Okay, so this is basically the production possibility curve. At this point, let me just write it with another color. This point A, this is the total amount of good X if I put all my resources in the production of good X. And this point B is the maximum amount of good Y that can be produced if I use all my resources in the production of good Y. And all these points on these graph, all these points are the possible combination that can be produced. Let's say this combination C, at this point I can produce 100 good Y and let's say 150 good X. So this is one of the combinations that I can produce by using all my resources on this production possibility curve or the production possibility graph. Before moving further, there are two very important things about this production possibility curve that you can see here. The first thing is it is downward sloping. Okay, and the second thing is it is concave outwards. The curve is concave curve. So this is something like this. This is not a straight line or a convex curve, but it is a concave curve, and there are certain very good reasons behind why is this a concave curve. Okay, so first let's talk about why is this downward sloping. Okay, it is downward sloping because of the limited amount of resources that we have. Let me just draw this curve once again, just y and x. This is downward sloping because if I have to produce, let's say I was there at this point and call this point A, and let's call this point a point B. This is downward sloping because if I want to produce more of good X, I need to reduce my production of Y. So basically this downward sloping implies that there are limited resources. Limited resources to produce the combination of both goods. Okay, so basically this downward sloping implies that if I want to increase the production of good X, I will have to reduce the production of good Y. And this is the basic concept of scarcity that we have already discussed in previous videos. Okay, so the basic concept of scarcity forces this curve to be downward sloping. Okay, now let's talk about why is this concave outwards and not a straight line or a convex curve. Okay, so now moving on to the basic assumption, why is this concave outward or something like this. Let's just first talk about the theoretical aspect of this. Okay, if I am producing very little of good X, so there will be many resources which I can efficiently use to produce good X. Okay, so in order to produce more of good X, I will have to reduce the production of good Y by very little, because I am transferring the resources from production of Y to production of good X that are more efficient for production of good X. Okay, so I am transferring resources that are more efficient to produce good X. So the rise in the production of good X will exceed the reduction in the production of good Y. Okay, and so if I am producing, so let's say I am continuously increasing my production of good X, so I will keep transferring my resources from good Y to good X. Okay, so the time will come then when all the efficient resources needed to produce good X will be producing good X. Okay, but still then I want to increase my production of good X, so I will transfer my resources which were needed, which were more efficient in production of good Y. So if I transfer those resources which were more efficient for the production of good Y, the increase in the production of good X will be there, but the decrease in the production of Y will be much greater than the increase in the production of good X. Although the resources are mobile, but their level of mobility depends with their efficiency and their production capacity to produce good X or good Y. So if I start my production of good X, the first thing which I'll do is that first I'll transfer most efficient resources which are needed for good production of good X. But if I'll continue with my increase in the production of good X, then a time will come when I'll transfer the least efficient resources for the production of good X to the production of good X. So this will leave me with the reduction in production of good Y much greater than the increment in the production of good X. So this is the main basic concept that the concavity of this curve explains. Okay, this curve is concave because for the production of good X, first I transfer the more efficient resources, but if I continue my increase in the production of good X, so then a time will come when the least efficient resources for the production of good X will be transferred for the production of good X. Let me just explain this through a graph let's say I have this graph. This is Y, this is X, and this is actually that. Let me just make it once and then again. Let's just call this the production possibility curve. Okay, so if I am here, I am producing, let's say if I am producing this much amount of good X and this much amount of good Y, and I am basically producing at point A. At this point, if I reduce my production of Y with a little bit, okay, this is not a big amount. This is, let's say, the change in Y, and this is the change in X. Okay, so here I can see that the change in X is greater than the change in Y. So basically I can also call it that the increase in the production of X is much greater than the decrease in the production of Y. Okay, but if I continue to move along this curve, and I reach at this point B. Okay, so now my production combination looks something like this. But if I want to increase my production of good X a little bit further, let's say at this point, so I will have to shift my resources from the production of good Y to the production of good X. Okay, here I can clearly see that the change in production of X is lesser than the change in production of Y. This means the increase in the production of X is much lower than the decrease in the production of Y. And here, but in the previous case, the increase was much greater than the decrease. So this concavity basically tells you about the marginal rate of transformation, or as we abbreviate is as MRT. Let me just write it, MRT. And the basic formula for MRT is change in X over change in Y. Now let's just leave it for you guys as a homework to explain the connection between marginal rate of transformation and the concept of opportunity cost, which we have done in the last video for steady space. Okay, so let's just leave it as a homework for you guys to find the connection between marginal rate of transformation and opportunity cost. Okay, so now moving on. Let's just talk a bit about the the production possibilities. So basically this is the boundary. Okay, so any producer can produce at this point A, and he can increase the production of both good X and good Y by increasing the efficiency of his resources, and can reach this point at the boundary. Okay, and I can see that the increase in production of X and the increase in production of Y is simultaneously happening because he was inside the boundary and he was not efficiently using all his resources. So if he will increase his efficiency, he will move to the point B on his production possibility curve. Okay, so now the question remains that can he move further from point B to point C here? And the answer to this is that it is only possible if there is an international trade between this country and other countries. But for now, as we have assumed that there is no trade, so the country cannot produce beyond its production possibility curve to the point C. Although he can consume to the point C if he will trade, but he cannot produce beyond this point B to point C. Okay, so this is for now for this video. In the next video, we will talk about the shifting of the PPC and why the PPC shift and why is this point B is the most efficient point. And you can find this video and all other videos at steadyspace.com. Thank you.